So where does Breath of the Wild fit into the timeline? Well, the answer to that may not be as clean-cut as we thought. In fact, I want to say Breath of the Wild made the Zelda timeline a bit more complex. And that is why I brought in my old war buddy, Joseph from Commonwealth Realm, to talk about this. So, that being said, where exactly does Breath of the Wild fit into the timeline?
Now, for those that are new to this whole Zelda timeline conundrum, there are 3 timelines. Now, the whole timeline split happened due to Ocarina of Time with the inclusion of time travel. To be extremely brief on the subject, it caused a 3-way timeline split. The whole debate about Breath of the Wild is where exactly does it take place within the timeline. Thankfully, it is narrowed down to some degree, as indicated by both in-game lore and Aonuma's words. Breath of the Wild takes place sometime after Ocarina of Time.
So at the very least, this is something we can all agree with. So all that leaves is which of the 3 timelines the game takes place in. Now, this is where things get a bit messy. At first glance, a placement within the child timeline makes sense, considering how Princess Zelda references the Twilight Invasion, which happened during that timeline. However, certain things come up that places that into question.
Around Zora's domain, there are these historical monuments that tell some of the history behind their kingdom. One of these monuments tells the story of Princess Ruto, the same one in Ocarina of Time. The scribings state that the divine beast of Varuta was named after the awakened sage Ruto. However, this brings up a huge question.
During the events of Ocarina of Time, Princess Ruto along with the rest of the awakened sages only became sages due to the events in Ocarina. However, those events never happened during the child timeline, since the Hero of Time went back in time to change events in this particular continuity. In other words, Ruto only became an awakened sage during both the downfall and adult timelines.
In addition to that, things become even more complicated. Breath of the Wild references characters within all the timelines in the Zelda franchise. For example, there is Mikau Lake and Lulu Lake, referencing the same characters in Majora's Mask. But this is just plain odd, since Termina was stated to be in a separate universe altogether. Additionally, there seems to be a statue of Darmani with Goron Village, the same character in Majora. Heck, there's even a lake named after him, known as Lake Darman. And that's without even mentioning the more complex bits. There is Linebeck Island referencing the character all the way in Phantom Hourglass in a total remote region of the timeline. On that note, there's also Mount Daphnes, which also alludes to King Daphnes in Wind Waker. And is the divine beast Valmedo referencing Medley? What the heck is going on here?
In other words, trying to pinpoint a solid timeline placement for Breath of the Wild isn't really an easy task, since there seems to be a bunch of contradictions. Originally, I was hesitant to subscribe to this next theory, but it can be possible all things considered. A timeline convergence, in which the timelines somehow come together, which could make all these references kind of make sense, but how the heck does that work? How can a given reality have more than one past? It's like saying that you just ate a sandwich, but in the past there were 2 timelines. One timeline you made a peanut butter sandwich, and in the other you made a ham and cheese, and both timelines happened in the future. Yeah, not sure how that can make sense.
Other possibilities may include a 4th timeline with just Breath of the Wild. Or maybe Nintendo just retconned the entire timeline that somehow fits Breath of the Wild into the mix.
However, with all this aside, there could be an explanation behind this whole timeline debacle. In the map, various different landmarks are named on events or people from opposing ends of the timeline. But who actually named all these different places? A possibility is that it could have been the Sheikah. Remember, you actually gain map data from the various Sheikah towers. Plus, it was stated from in-game lore that 10,000 years before Breath of the Wild, the Sheikah were an extremely technologically advanced civilization, in which case I do see it likely that the Sheikah had a part in the exploration and perhaps naming of these regions, and as a result placed map data into the towers. So where did the Sheikah get all the names then? Well, here's a theory.
Let's take a look at Majora's Mask, a game where basically a society exists independent from Hyrule. But in this completely different world, the Sheikah have made an appearance, meaning that the tribe has made their mark here. Additionally, the Sheikah within Breath of the Wild are extremely technologically advanced. Heck, even Purah managed to devise a way to reverse aging.
And if we look back in Skyward Sword, we do see timeshift technology, along with some Sheikah symbols. In other words, I do see it likely that the Sheikah at their technological peak was able to perform some feats of time manipulation.
To add another point of reference, within Ocarina of Time there existed a boss known as Phantom Ganon. At the end of the boss fight, Ganondorf banished him to a place within dimensions. And within Majora's Mask, there existed a blacksmith by the name of Zubora and Gabora. And interestingly enough, Phantom Ganon also appears in Wind Waker, wielding a sword which translates to the same blacksmiths found in Majora's Mask, Zubora and Gabora, which is in a completely different timeline. So is Phantom Ganon in Wind Waker the same one in Ocarina that did some kind of timeline somersault? It's not really known.
Whichever the case, floating from one timeline to another may not be as inconceivable as what may be originally thought. The Sheikah at their technological peak may have had the capability to venture in different times, and through their venturing managed to name various landmarks based on their journey, and stored them in each of the Sheikah towers. And considering how close the Sheikah were to each of the races of Hyrule, they gave them divine beasts after all, it could make sense that they may have had a hand in this.
So with all that said and done, where does Breath of the Wild take place in the timeline? Well, we have no idea. There are so many theories that all have compelling arguments that it's difficult to pinpoint a solid explanation. So is Breath of the Wild part of a timeline convergence, a fourth timeline, a complete retcon of the series, or is there some weird explanation that fits Breath of the Wild into one of the timelines? We're not completely sure.
In other words, until the ninjas over at Nintendo states themselves where Breath of the Wild takes place in, there will still be theorizing on the subject. Heck, debates are still going on today. But if you want to see a video discussing the timeline in depth, Conrad over at Commonwealth Realm made a video about the subject. It is a long one though, so get your favorite beverage ready. Also, special thanks goes to my boy Joey here for helping out in this video.
No, Andy. Thank you for having me. But anyway guys, thank you so much for watching this video by Mr. McIntyre Productions. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even be in this position going over working at Commonwealth Realm with Conrad and Alex. So be sure to check out our stuff as well as Mr. McIntyre here's stuff. So please like, comment, and subscribe if you're new. Till then, this has been the video of the day.